Hey everyone, this is Mike Matsuno, and welcome to the Man in Japan Live. If you can help me again, if you can let me know if in the comments how the audio is and how the video is, and if everything is matching. I think that's the main thing. So if you can just let me know in the comments, just briefly, audio okay, video okay. Anyway, I just want to welcome all of you for joining me today. Really appreciate it. Today is August 4th in Japan, and we're going through a heat wave. Those of you who live in Japan know that already, of course. If this is your first time on one of my YouTube lives, I'm Mike Matsuno. I'm originally from Honolulu, Hawaii. I'm fourth generation Yonsei, Japanese American. I've been in Japan as a total of over 30 years. And I have a Man in Japan channel that introduces different aspects of Japan. And I make videos, I do some podcast video interviews and some lives like this. All of them are usually related to something about Japan. So if you're interested, please subscribe. The link is below down in the description. Summer in Japan is the season that you definitely want to avoid unless you are visiting Hokkaido. And I've said this before in my travel lives and things. For example, yesterday was 97 degrees Fahrenheit here, right? And if you add in the humidity, that brings it up to over 100 degrees. So this is not just like regular hot, this is like super hot. I know a lot of you who live in the United States on the East Coast and Florida have said that you have similar types of temperatures. So you do understand. One thing I will say though, that Japanese cooling systems are not like they are in the United States. They're much more simple. So, for example, I have a 3DK, which is three rooms, and you don't have central cooling or central heating. So you just do one room at a time. So if you go to different rooms, you got to go and start it and turn it off the other one. Because another thing is that the cost of having air conditioning running is really really expensive. So again, there's you're trying to manage the cost as well as the heat. For example, yesterday I have a thermometer in my other tatami room, and it was 95 degrees in the room, not outside, in the room. And if you add in humidity, it's probably over 100. And up to last week, I was trying to be tough and trying to save money on air condition costs. But finally, last week, I had to break down. It was so hot that now, of course, I'm using air condition. In July alone, there were 12,000 cases of heat stroke in Japan, and 23 people died. Every year, people die because of heat stroke. I'm sure that's in any country, but 12,000 in July, and the worst is happening right now. August is supposed to be the worst. This year, they're expecting an extreme summer this year, and again, the people who are oh thank you. Oh, audio is good. Thank you, Ario. J Star. Okay, hey Mike, thanks for letting me know. Um, People who 60% of the people who die are over 65 years old, 65 and older. And one of the reasons is, and I've said this before in a previous life, is that a lot of the older people were not raised with this type of air conditioned units. Like I said, when I first came to Japan over 30, 35 years ago, there wasn't this type of all season where you can just turn on and turn off. They were the old fashioned ones that made these huge noises like bah! And so what happens is, if you used it would, you could use it in the day, but at night you had to turn it off. And the reason was because it made so much noise, and people next door, and in Japan houses are very close, that it would keep people up, and meiwaku, bother other people, so you wouldn't do that. So you turn it on and you turn it off and you go to sleep, and the next thing you know, you wake up 2 hours later just profusely perspiring and sweating. And so, I don't know how we used to do it before, but it was amazing. I think I did tell you the story of when I was a graduate student at Doshisha, where we were living in a dorm in Kyoto, and there was no air conditioning, and I would take 10 cold showers a day, but that's the only thing you could do with three fans going, but no air conditioning. So yeah, it's hot in Japan. So again, if you are thinking about coming to Japan, don't come in July, August, September, if possible, and or go to Hokkaido in that case. Um, So today is going to be another scorching day. They say it's going to be 38 degrees, which is, over 100 again. So, and, but one other thing that has happened is finally the rainy season is done in Tohoku. And they just started the Tohoku Nebuta Festival. For many of you who knows those beautiful floats that are, with the lighting inside, especially at night, it's beautiful. It's going on right now for a week. I think a lot of you who are not from Japan or even in Japan would like to see that. It's up in Tohoku. Another festival that's going on right now is in Akita. I just saw it on the news. I don't remember the name, but it's the one where they have like 50 or 60 lanterns and it's held on like a bamboo pole, and it's really, really heavy. It's about the heaviest is like 50 kilograms, which is what, over 100 pounds. And there's one guy with his arm and he's holding it up. And that's one of the famous festivals of Akita. So, yeah, in summer in Japan, although it's the hottest time and I say not to come, that's when a lot of the festivals are. So, you may still want to come if you don't mind, if you can take the heat, right? So, and again, summer brings Obon. Obon is usually the middle of August, August 10th to August 20th. And what it is basically it's when a lot of people go back to their hometown or their jikka. It's where their parents are from, or maybe their grandparents are from. A lot of people move in from the country, get work in the big cities, but their home, so-called hometown, is where like their home, their family grave is. So they go back and they pray for the spirits because during Obon, what is supposedly supposed to happen, and this is what I hear, is that the spirits of your great ancestors come back during that week. And that's when you pray for them, and then you put little offerings of the food. Maybe they like beer, you put beer or manju or mochi, and you put it out there for them, and then you pray for them. And after the week, they go back to the spirit land, and that's what Obon is. And there's a lot of Obon dancing. I guess it's a celebration of welcoming your ancient ancestors and the spirits and things. And so there's a lot of Obon dance. So there are also festivals and Obon dancing. So yes, although I say not to come during summer, if you want that cultural aspect of Japan, then summer is the only time to really come for that. And then you can see, and what is also interesting, and I think I've said this story before, is that after Obon, which is usually around August 20th, they say not to swim. And I remember I was living in Toyama Prefecture, and Toyama's right by the ocean, beautiful. Well, August 20th, it's still very, very hot, and I people said, "Oh, you cannot swim, Mike. Mike, you cannot swim." I said, "Why not?" And they said, "Well, there were two basic stories to that. One was that your ancestors come back during this time, and if you go swimming after, when they're going back to the spirit land, they can pull you and take you back with them. So you're not supposed to swim." So that was one. And there was one that was probably a little bit more practical, the second one, and it was more about that that's when the jellyfish season starts and the jellyfish start to come in. But again, my thought was that, well, they don't come in all the time. Like in Hawaii, they come in and they go out. That, you could go and still swim if they're not, the jellyfish aren't in. But again, no one's thinking that much except me, I think. But so those were the two stories I had. So a lot of people don't go swimming after August 20th, because of whatever stories there are. Okay. So that's just wanted to give you the update on what's going on. Thank you, Matt Hatta. You're back. Good to see you back. Matt Hatta says, let's see. Hi, Abraham. Hi, Tristan. No choice but to visit during this. Oh, okay. So Tristan says this, and this is interesting because it's true that you can that he says that unfortunately he can't go because yeah, if you're a teacher and educator, you have no choice but to come, as well as your children. If you bring in your children or your students, they're off during that time, so you have to come. So yes, I'm sorry. Although I discourage you to come in summer, if that's the only time you come, yeah, please. I hope you can at least experience Hokkaido a little bit. Um, just get ready that it's going to be very, very warm. As if So again, Tristan writes here. Last summer when I was in Japan, it was really hot, but I was still glad you went. Okay, so if you listen to Tristan, if that's the only time you can go, great. Come during summer. Okay. Hi, Abraham. Mad Hatta. Mad Hatta was in Sapporo. Let's see. Um, I was in Sapporo this year in June 2024. It was a bit cool, but when I traveled to Hakodate, it was getting warmer. Yeah, June is still cool. I think yesterday it was, what was it, 24 degrees centigrade. So what, 72 roughly, right around there. So even if Hokkaido sometimes gets up into the 30s, it's still not that humid. And so it's still durable. It's kind of like Hawaii in a way. It reminds me of Hawaii in some when it gets hot. So it's still nice. So yes, Hokkaido is very nice. I had to also add it on another one. I saw the floats being made in Aomori when I was there. Yeah, great. Irasiwa, howdy. Okay, great. Thank you for all of you being here. And so today it's a big subject, but I just decided I'm going to limit it to the idea of international. This idea of what is it when you talk about this idea of internationalization. So, like for some of you who are not in Japan or in Japan, if someone says to you, what is it to be international? Write in the comments, what do you think it is to be? Someone says, what is international? Or what does it mean to be if you are international? And another kind of a similar question is, what is internationalization? And in America, not too many people, think about it that much. I think, like, international or kokusaika is internationalization. But in Japan, these words are catchphrases that are really quite. A lot of people use it for advertising, for like getting people to come to the university or to their company. This idea of kokusaika, like we're very internationalized, or kokusaijin, which is international person. There's a lot of focus on this, and they're marketing words, they're catchphrases, but they're quite important in Japan. And that word internationalization has kind of evolved these days to globalization. Although they're a little bit different, globalization, internationalization, they kind of end up to mean the same, to be global, globalization. But again, the way that Japanese tend to use it is different from maybe what a lot of people would be thinking about, like, globalization and the outsourcing of factories overseas, and then um, less jobs in your country, or vice versa, where you can get cheap consumer products. Like Walmart gets a lot of it from China, and they created a whole empire in that. So yeah, that's all part of the whole globalization, internationalization idea. But in Japan, these words are really important. So if you ask the average Japanese person, what is kokusaika? What is internationalization? Most people will say something to the effect of, you can speak English well. That's how simple it, many times it's limited to. Or kokusaijin, what is an international person? It's like, it's a person who speaks English well. And that's it pretty much. So English, that's how big it is. 2 weeks ago when we had our other live, we talked about the English education and how it's not working that well, the system itself. But that's how important the idea of English, kokusaika, internationalization, or being an international person is. So, um, when I looked up on Google the idea of what it does it mean to be international, this is what they wrote. They wrote something to the effect of, being international means having an outlook that transcends one's own national boundaries, embracing cultural diversity and global awareness. And that's true, right? I mean, that's the lofty, big meaning that I think a lot of uh, Americans would say something more to this effect. But for Japanese, a lot of times it's much more simplistic in the sense that it's about people, because I think, again, this is my opinion, that there's not much diversity in Japan, and Japan is completely dependent on, like, 95% of their oil and energy needs come from outside, and they have to work with different countries, and they need to get along within Asia and with China and the United States and everyone, that they are much more sensitive about this idea of kokusaika. So they're not thinking so much like, world peace. I mean, they are, but not like, embracing cultural diversity. So back in 1990s, Japan came out with this idea called global jinsai. Global jinsai basically translates directly, and I don't know if you can even use that in regular English. It's called global human resources. I guess you could, but I've never really heard it outside of Japan. Basically, what it was to a lot of the industry, the companies, their request was for universities to cultivate, to train global ready graduates to enhance Japan's global competitivity, to become competitive. And that's great. That's 1990s they did this, right? Well, today nothing really has changed that much in Japanese education. And in 2 weeks, I will talk about Japanese education and the whole international idea of outbound students, inbound students, and the whole idea. But again, because when you ask yourself, what does global ready mean? That's a really hard question to even, like what is global ready? Like, is it just speaking English, or is it mean that you've studied abroad, or that you lived abroad? And it's a very general meaning. Let me go back. Okay, J Star says in this. Let me just add this on. J Star says in the U.S. no one thinks this because it's the land of immigrants. Yes, exactly, exactly. Thank you, J Star. That was a point that I was going to make. Also, is that the United States, although in my opinion, when it comes to international events and things, is still quite narrow visioned. You know, they are saving the world and doing different things and supporting Ukraine and different things, but still, the average person, it's really about America, and it's a large country. It's basically self sufficient. It has all the resources. It has all those everything going on, Hollywood, sports, everything. So no need to really look outside so much. But and it's the diversity they have. They already have the diversity, right? It's a land of immigrants, so you already have diversity within America. Where in Japan, which is more very little diversity and very dependent outside, that the whole international outlook becomes very very important. So yes, thank you, Jason. That's exactly right. The diversity of the United States kind of, I don't want to say satisfies, but basically you have enough going around that you're seeing differences, and you're learning from other ethnic backgrounds or heritages or races, things that you're learning. And so you're getting it in a different kind of a bubble. But again, in America, you are seeing different people doing different things. And in Japan, you're not really getting that, except because, the system is very Japanese, and everyone is very orderly and following what they're supposed to do. So there's not much chance to see different things. And that's why I believe that getting the Japanese out of Japan to see things and to be able to learn things and to compare and to go abroad for university is so important. But more and more, you see the reverse happening. The Japanese are going inward. Less people are going on study abroad. Less people are going out. The younger generation tends to be much more happy where they are. They got their iPhone. They got their friends. Like who needs to go out, kind of thinking. So that again, back in 1990s, there were more people going out for study abroad and degree seeking study abroad, which I think is the most important. Whereas today, very much less. I think there's like 20,000 less Japanese students going out for study abroad. And the study abroad they're going out on now, the majority is less than a month. So how much experience and how much world vision and how much, can you get, right? So yes, thank you, J Star, for that. If there are any more comments, please put them in the, if any more opinion or comments, please put them in. So when the Japanese government and Prime Minister Abe, he focused on this idea of global jinsai, global ready people, and and in his Abenomics, that was one of the key points, But to me, when he talked about global jinsai, it was more of a hard skill thing. Speaking English, of course, IT skills, like computer skills, and maybe something to the effect of being able to work with other countries, maybe negotiation, good at negotiation. But there was very little talk about study soft skills. And that's what in a previous live I talked about, I talked about this book. Maybe you can't see it because it's of the green screen. But why I wrote this book was because I felt that the soft skills, the global life skills. Now, this idea of global life skills comes from my friend Sami Takahashi, who runs an English school in Canada. And, it was assertiveness, leadership, problem solving, and critical thinking. And I would even add one more: active listening or active communication. So those were called the global life skills, I think, that are so important. The problem is that the government cannot measure, you can't really measure soft skills, right? And soft skills list is huge. It could be like 20 or more different things: open-minded thinking, risk-taking, independent thinking, spontaneity, a lot of the things, almost everything that I write about in this book is part of this list of soft skills. And I think this is as important as the actual English. But the government just focused on global jinsai. So in my mind, what the Japanese government was creating was like corporate warriors, corporate samurai, to just do better, to make sure that Japan can survive. And so that's where the focus was, which is natural, right? Go where you are sure, go where it's the hard skills, get those hard skills, make Japan a better place. And so very, very practical. Um, but there's also many Japanese who I have talked to, and I just asked one of my friends, Seiko Sensei. She teaches in Kyoto, about what she thought. She's an educator, high school. So when I asked her, what do you think a kokusaika is? And so she had said something to the effect of, it's a kokusaika is having the same similar standards as other advanced countries. We can compete with each other in the fields of business, education, culture, sports, entertainment. Yeah, I think that's really it. It's like the Olympics, right? That's going on right now. You're all competing, but yet you folks are constantly improving and getting better. And it's kind of a friendly competition, right? That concept where everybody is competing but trying to get better, I think, is really important. So Seiko Sensei wrote that, and she also added, as individuals, we should understand or try to understand other cultures and society and be open to the positive changes that Kokusaika brings. Exactly. You want to be open to what, the positive things that internationalization brings in. Um, but always, right? Negative and positive, they come in together. And I think that's what a lot of the Japanese are always mindful of, that they push back on, is because they worry that, with internationalization might come crime, might come drugs, might come human trafficking, and all these things that they see in the news of other countries. So there's also that. And so the government does this little dance, this like dance about like I said last week, I think, or 2 weeks ago, I said, like, the government doesn't want to use the word immigration. That's like a no word. I mean, in Japanese, they don't want to use the word. They use they talk around it. So they have created new visas for workers, like people who want to work in whether it's the factories or CNAs, healthcare CNAs, auto shop repair, and a lot of the jobs that they don't have enough people for. Because remember, Japan has the largest number of older people over 60. Over The number of people in Japan is 38%. Almost 40% of Japan society is over 60. And most of those people are retired or don't work or live off pension. And the pressure on the social security system, and they have social medicine here, which is great, but the pressure on that is that the other 60%, and a lot of them are still not working, cannot cannot keep maintain the tax base. And yet the option is to let more foreign workers come in who work and pay taxes. But yet there's this pushback. So you see this in other countries too, but that's especially what is going on in Japan. So anyway, getting back to what I was talking about, let me see. Let me go through the. Okay, so in the U.S., Mata, I noticed some photos of Japanese families looking at Americans talking out loud, not realizing that they were talking out loud. And okay, this is a little bit different, but let's put it on. Um, Here it is. So Matt Hatta says, I noticed that some places I was at, the Japanese people and myself looking at Americans talking out loud, not realizing that they were talking out loud, and most of the people were moving away from them. Yeah, I see that often. Normally, they won't say anything, and they would just avoid and move on. And Americans don't realize that we all don't want to know what they are doing in college. Americans forget to use their inner voice. Okay. Um, Okay, thank you, Merata. I think anything else? Okay. So getting back to what I was talking about was that when it talks about what does it mean to be international in Japan, does it mean that just speaking English fluently? Or, a lot of Japanese equate being international as speaking English fluently. That's enough. Does it mean like you have study abroad experience? Or maybe you worked abroad? Or maybe you volunteered. Japan has a volunteer system similar to like Peace Corps in the United States called JICA. They pay a little bit more at JICA, but they have theirs that they go into different developing countries and they teach or they help with agriculture or whatever needs there are. So they have a volunteer system. Is it a kikokushijo? Kikokushijo, kikokusei are people who have gone overseas with their family. Like, for example, a lot of the big trading companies or the bigger companies that have subsidiaries or they're opening up a new branch in a foreign country will send the worker over. And the worker, if they're going to be there for many years, has the option to take his family with him. And normally, if the family is still young, or maybe they don't have kids yet, a lot of times the family will go with them and they will be raised there for whatever years they are. So what happens is these children, they go into the regular local schools, so they learn usually the foreign language of whatever country they're going to, whether it's in China or whether it's in United States. Especially when it comes to an English speaking country, they tend to go into the local schools. And then there's like usually like a Saturday Japanese class that they go to help them upkeep on their kanji and then their Japanese studies. But what happens is that they acquire English and they're very good. I met a couple of Doshisha international high school students at the Indian restaurant nearby here, and they were fluent in both languages. And their English was strong. One guy, his English was stronger than his Japanese. He said because he didn't really pay attention to the Saturday Japanese school. So you have these students, and when they come back after 3 4 years, and then they are they I think they are the closest thing to so-called being international and Japan's secret weapon if they would learn and maximize and optimize how to use these kikoku se in the best way. What normally happens many times in Japan is, at least before, it's changing now, but still conservative, is that, and I know now because of entering into the company, when you go into the company, everybody supposedly should be the F word, fair, equal. So even if you come in and you're really strong in English because you're a kikokusei, kikokushijo, they call it returnees, you're a returnee, but still you're required to do like the minimum of Japanese, whether it's doing documents or writing the kanji or whatever. They treat you the same. Part of it is because management doesn't know how to manage people who are so unique or different or have these other skills. So it's not their fault, but that's the way that they have been taught. So these people come in and then they're kind of forced to become like everybody else to mainstream them in. And what I was thinking was by the time they graduate from college, they're already adults that, I think Gary Vee on social media, he always talks about self-awareness and know your strengths. Go with your strengths and your weaknesses have somebody else cover for you or figure out how to have someone else do that part for you. I agree. I think that for like kikokusei and kikokushijo, you can't mainstream them in and have them force them to become at the same level of Japanese as the other students. You have a special secret weapon. But I believe that a lot of these kikokusei returnees don't get that opportunity. So a lot of them probably work for a foreign company, maybe in Japan, and maybe even that's not enough. I mean, that's too still constricted for them. A lot of them go overseas or return back to the country that they were studying in, whether it's United States or wherever, and they get a job there. So Japan loses these human resources also. These are Japanese who speak English, who are basically bicultural and bilingual, but because of the again, remember Japan is basically a homogeneous society where it's basically Japanese, and if you don't fit in, the standing nail gets pounded down, right? I've said that many times before. That's still very evident here in Japan. So Yes, I think the Kikoku Shicho are the best secret weapon of Japan, but they still haven't figured out how to maximize. If I was making a company in Japan, this is what I would do. I would hire and recruit all the Kikoku Shise into my company if I was doing like an international company because they would come in with different ideas. They know from where they're bicultural, they're bilingual, you know. Maybe their Japanese is not perfect, but they can still get around and speaking is fine. And maybe it's the writing that they struggle with. That's the best idea. Set up your company and hire the Kikokusei only, not only, but mainly, and see what happens. But again, another thing is that if you study internationalization, can you, if you study internationalization, are you capable of um, understanding what it is to be international? Or do you have to experience it, right? Do you have to go out? So, you know, if you can study it, then yeah, a lot of Japanese could study it in Japan. Personally, I think that you have to have some experience. You can't just study something and then be able to say, yeah, this is internationalization or be able to lead internationalization. I think you got to lead through experience, but that's my opinion. And the last is the international businessman, people who have worked abroad or have lived abroad. I mean, worked and lived abroad for a period of time. Or, but those are more of the ones that I think that they take their family and things. But the ones that just go for business trips alone. I think these are two separate categories. One is that they're living there, they're invested, you know, they took a lot of them take their family, or even if they go alone, but they're there for a long period, versus just going and just getting snapshots, you know, going for a business trip. Very, very different, I think. I think this is much more important. So, what I think is that Japan is in a crisis where they don't have enough of a workforce. And they're trying to do the dance around, extending the retirement a little bit later, letting more women back into the workforce, you know, at better jobs, but it's still very slow. I think the easiest way and the best way is to let more immigrants, not immigrants, but or foreign workers and people who want to immigrate in. Um, because there's a big need in Japan for CNAs or for factory workers that are needed that a lot of Japanese young people don't want to do, and because there's not enough of them, there's a work shortage, right? So, and another idea that I think is really really good is that, and a couple of companies in Japan have done this is, let's say you have a computer section or you have a computer company, IT, and you're trying to recruit people, but there's very few graduates of computer schools or IT skills, or even if they graduate, do they have the skills that you need for your company? Well, my idea was go to India, which college graduates, and a lot of them are IT computer graduates, and recruit there, where 29% of college graduates don't have jobs, are unemployed in India. Go there and recruit and bring them back to Japan. Now, the problem here is, of course, and a lot of companies don't want to do this, they're going to have to create a whole support system for them, right? Language, food, housing, of course, visa, and whatever needs they have, right? They're going to have to set something up like this. Most Japanese companies either don't know how or not willing, or both. And so they tend to still go out to the Japanese university students and they start to hire students who graduated in economics or graduated in social science or in English, not IT or computer, which means their learning curve is years. Imagine how long it would take you to learn all what is needed to become a so-called programmer or whatever is needed at the company. Probably minimum 3 years, I would guess, maybe longer. But yet, the Japanese companies, many of them, I would say the majority of them, are still, they figure, okay, we want to get the IT computer graduates. Okay, they're gone. They went to the big companies or the better companies. You're a small company, middle sized company. Who do you go? You're going to go to India and bring them here and then try to set up a whole support system? Or you're just going to hire a Japanese graduate? Maybe they have no experience in computer, but you can train them, you think. I don't know. I wouldn't do that. But that's what seems to be going on right now. And when I ask even my company about why not bring in, people from India or Sri Lanka, or whoever has the skills you need, and tap into those skills. And they can also help teach your staff, because I'm sure in India they're way more advanced as far as in the universities about teaching IT and things. But nobody wants to touch that topic. It seems to be like so foreign. Again, anything that's outside of the norm um, is, again, as I said before, in Japan, change is very slow. And what I think, or what maybe a foreigner, Westerner thinks has changed, and what the Japanese thinks has changed or reform or kaikaku is very, very different. So I vote for that idea of bringing in people, and then so then you get people who are paying taxes in Japan. You're getting, and another thing that you're getting is you're helping to diverse your own company and bringing in new ideas. Remember what I said before in one of my lives about diversity. Silicon Valley was built and established by basically immigrants, whether it's first generation or second generation. And a couple of articles I read said that Silicon Valley would not be there if it wasn't for the open immigration policy the United States had, as far as bringing in students, and then and then after they graduate, they get jobs, and then they are offered visas that eventually they can stay in America as long as they want, forever if they want. And if you do also remember, I talked about Scuba University in Ibaraki Prefecture, who was building a model built on that whole idea of Silicon Valley, Stanford University, and it never took place because the foreign ministry was not willing to offer like positions to these foreign graduates of doctorate, postdoctorate. And so these people, of course, it was basically come study a lot of, they were given scholarships and everything, train them. Thank you. See you later. Go, And so those graduates, a lot of them went to Singapore or Hong Kong or Germany or United States. Think of it. Japan would train them, pay for them, and then when they graduate, you're just waiting there. Yeah, come to us. I thought to myself, wow, the investment they made, they didn't get much return, and sad, I thought. So anyway, again, that's my opinion. Um, so yeah, I say bring in the best and the brightest and try to establish a different whole system. Okay, is there anybody else has anything to say about this? No? Okay. So another thing that I did want to talk about was, when you talk about the education system in Japan, which back in the 60s, 70s, 80s were considered one of the best systems in Japan, maybe even in the world at that time. People were doing really well. Japan was noted to have a great educational system. Nobody talked about the English at that time, but the educational system. Um, and through the years, it's just gone, slowly it has declined. And I think they have to reform the whole education system to become more of a critical thinking system. Right now, it's basically memorize, do the test, gone, right? Memorize, put on the test, and gone. So I believe a lot of the Tokyo, University of Tokyo graduates have like a photographic memory, because that's basically the test. If you can memorize all the information and put it on the test, you can get into Tokyo University. I'm guessing. Sorry, Tokyo University graduates. But I think that if you have a photographic memory, that's the key to success in Japan. Now, everyone, even my friend Sami Takahashi, who has the school, he just wrote to me an email yesterday, and he said that the students from Japan who are coming now, because they're coming for the fall, they're coming in August for the fall, they are not good. Their English skills are very poor. And then he had listened to part of my live about education. I was kind of critical of the teachers and things. And he was saying it's not only the teachers, and he has a point here. It's not only the teachers; it's also the students themselves. They're not motivated. They're not really out to learn. So it's a double thing here where you're dealing with. You have, it's the teaching that maybe needs work and needs to be changed and reformed somewhat, but it's also the students themselves. So again, it goes back to the chicken or egg idea, right? Is it the teachers that should be influencing the students, or is it the students who should be motivated? Like, which is first? It's still hard to make that call, but again, it's yeah, as he said, it's both sides really, but I would still say a lot of it is with the teaching and the way and the method of teaching. Um, we talked about 2 weeks ago where in Japan the English studies is focused on the reading, the grammar, and a lot of the method they use is, for those of you who have studied a foreign language, it's called grammar translation, which is basically translating the foreign language into your mother tongue, which makes it really easy for the teacher, right? Because you're not it's into the mother tongue, whether it's English into Japanese. So it's an easy way to teach, but it really doesn't teach the student much of anything. But that's one of the primarily used methods in Japan of teaching language in the high school and maybe even junior high school is if there's grammar, there's reading, and there's this grammar translation method, which again, I believe that should be changed to a more interactive, more dynamic way. But again, we talked about it 2 weeks ago. Maybe the teachers don't know English well enough, or maybe they're not at that point where they're ready to take that on. So, and adding the global life skills into the Japanese educational system, assertiveness, critical thinking, leadership, problem solving, risk taking, etc., etc., etc. How do you add those dynamics into the present Japanese educational system? I don't know, but I would say that's one of the main things that maybe needs to be worked on. University education, I talked about it a little bit before, and I'll talk about it more in 2 weeks. It's basically same. It's stuck, and they wanted global ready graduates, but it's really not happening. The sciences and things are a little bit different, but when you talk about basic social sciences and the majority of people who graduate from college, they're getting the same education that is not really meeting the requirements of what the companies need. Well, you see this in a lot of countries, not only Japan. I heard about it in Amsterdam and in Europe and maybe the United States too. Although the United States, because they're thinking they're supposedly teaching you, the whole Socrates method and the why and the critical thinking, that at least you have the mindset. But in Japan, it's basically you have remembered and put on the test. And so university in Japan is very, I don't want to say, it's vanilla. There's no specialty. It's just vanilla. And the Ministry of Education has tried to make some changes, but again, they're like the band-aid effect, right? Nobody is looking at the whole entire idea and how we need to create a completely new system for the future of Japan. Think about it. Japan used to be the number two most economically strong country in the world, right? United States, Japan, and then China, and became the second, and Japan dropped to number three. You could say the size of China and then the scale. Yeah, China way bigger. United States huge. China, the biggest country in the world. Yeah, okay, Japan. But just recently this year, Germany has passed Japan and is now number three. That the yen rate also does have a connection to that. But let's just say overall, Japan has dropped to number four. So I think there's a crisis. There's like a fire, house on fire, house on fire. What are you going to do, right? And but nobody seems to be so worried in the sense that it's like, okay, we're number three, still number three, that's good, or oh, number four, still good, number four. So now you have a smaller country like Germany, more close and similar to Japan, and now they've passed Japan. So that should be kind of a wake up call for Japan, that you got to change the model. You got to start working on changing the systems. You cannot do the same thing over and over. As I quoted before, Einstein said, but one of my viewers said Einstein never said that, and I did Google it. He's correct. He or she was correct. So the expression is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. It's a sign of insanity. That's what's going on now, I believe, in the whole education and the whole government system, and nobody knows what to do. And I think another problem is because you don't have critical thinkers within the system itself either. Those bureaucrats, those top level bureaucrats that are doing in the ministries, they all went to Tokyo University, Kyoto University, the big national universities, but they came up to the same system. I would highly doubt that even 1% of them ever went on study abroad or had it was exposed out to international things. So how can they be the creators of these policies when they don't have the experience themselves? And that goes back to what I was saying before. Can you just study internationalization like this and then be able to come up with policies? Maybe. But of course, I believe that if you experienced it and you lived it, you can now really address it. And again, that's my opinion. Yeah. So, um, yes. And a couple other things is like, and this connects also to the Japanese banking and financial systems. In my history, I have to deal with Japanese banks and simple things like changing my bank from one bank to another to pay, not to takes like 3 months. So in Japan, if you have to do something at the bank, be sure you allow yourself lots of time, because anything that's a little bit different, or things like, okay, I'm using this bank to pay and now I'm going to use this bank to pay, that takes 3 months. I don't know why. So recently, just last week, I was changing my bank at the at for one of these places I had to pay, and I worked with the realtor and we talked about it, and I applied 2 months ago, and then I said, okay, I want to make sure everything's okay because I don't want any problems in the near future. And I was trying to be proactive, right? Well, nothing. I checked in a month ago, no problem, Mike. Everything's okay, I thought. Then suddenly I get a call from the realtor saying, oh, it was rejected. Took them 2 months. I don't know if it was the realtor that was slow or it was the the bank that was slow. And I said, you know what? I said, I might be, not here. I might be guiding my sister's group tour around. I won't be able to pay the rent, like I don't want, trouble. And so we went through this whole thing. I went to the office and we talked about it, an hour of discussion. You know what the problem was? My bank card has in katakana Maiku Matsuno. And that wasn't the name or the exact characters that was used on the form. I just copied the bank card because thinking the bank card is the bank card, right? Just write the same thing on and that's safe. Well, apparently, when I made this account in 1986, on my account is in Romaji alphabet, Mike Matsuno. If I don't use that when I apply to just change the bank, they reject it. And it took 2 months to reject. And so when we talked about it for an hour, the realtor boss, he called the bank. They wouldn't give him the information. I was sitting right there. I got on the phone. They wouldn't give me the information. I said, I would have to go all the way to Kyoto City to get it done. And I said, I can't believe this. My name is Mike Matsuno. On my bank card is in katakana. If you translate Mike Matsuno into Japanese, it's Mike Matsuno. It's katakana, Mike Matsuno. But they wouldn't take it. And so I I wrote Mike Matsuno in alphabet and I gave it to the realtor and he took it to their head office and they went to the bank the following day. I get the call. Mike, sorry, it's going to take 3 months to get this done. I said, all I'm asking is to be okayed. I'm just changing banks. It's Mike Matsuno. No. So my point here is that systems in Japan are archaic and they are slow, and something that simple can take 3 months. As far as efficiency goes, give it the boo and just not effective. So I'm always like worried every time I do anything with the bank. And if you work with the bank, you should be ready that anything can happen because little things. Because even sometimes my name is Matsuno Mike Hideo. Mike Matsuno. Mike Matsuno in katakana. Mike Matsuno in some people even use the kanji, which I don't use the kanji. There's like 5 different variations, and you have to use the exact same one that you actually applied for at that time, or you're rejected. So it becomes very, very complicated at times. And so I think, You know, this is my best example. In Japan, I love the service. You get the best service, right? You go to the bank, it's very efficient. They have so many nice people there just checking you in. Give you the number, you tell them, oh, what they ask you what you're going to do. They push us like three numbers. I cannot read, so they help me get a number. You can sit there. It's cool, air conditioned or heated in the winter. There's water there, nice music going on, but it takes a long time. Everything takes a long time to go through this whole process. I might sit there half an hour, 45 minutes sometimes, but usually, everything takes a long time. But the service is great. But the actual system and the way they do it is super slow. I feel that's the same, similar to when you ride, um, when you work with JAL or ANA Airlines in Japan. If you try to go online, their system, their online reservation system, even in English, is slow and there's a lot of hoops you got to jump and it's really, really complicated. However, when you get on the plane and at the gate, they got a lot of people employed, great service, everyone's nice and kind. So you get the great service, but the system on getting to the plane or getting, like the system itself is the problem. And that would be my conclusion in Japan about, and we go back to internationalization, they need to bring in different other countries' systems to help them increase their productivity and efficiency so that they can be much more competitive in Japan and in the world. So that's basically my conclusion about all of this is that they have the great workforce, you have motivated, hardworking people, but the systems trip themselves over. They trip themselves, is what I said before, right? That is what I think happens in Japan is that it's not the competitors so much as their own systems trip themselves. Let me give you one more example. I worked for the Ship for World Youth. I was teaching on the ship, the ship of 250 young people, and they have the Prime Minister Cabinet Office group, the staff. I didn't know until I taught 3 times on the ship, that the director of that program, he rotates out 1 year usually, 1 to 2 years. It means that he comes and in a year, usually a year, but sometimes they stay longer, 2 years, they rotate to another section. If you are a director and you wanted to establish new things or wanted to make things better, you wouldn't have the time because by the time you learn what was going on, it'll take you 6 months to a year, and then you're moving on. As well as you don't want to start something when you know that you're going to be moving on and no one will finish what you started. So everyone just leaves things as it is. So nothing gets done. It just stays the same. And nobody wants to address this because it's inherent in the system. So I don't know. That would be my thing. So when it comes to what is international in Japan, oh, sorry, I didn't pay attention to the comments. Gomenasai, I got off. Let's see. Here's howdy, hi from Canada, Bronson. Nice to talk to you. Here's quietly wondering. Agree with your analysis. There's not enough top-down thinkers in Japan. I think it goes back to there are not enough critical thinkers who are really, really who get it. And I think through experience, through it's not just learning from a book. You got to live it. Imagine if you went through school all the way. You went to a good high school, you went to Tokyo University, and you got a great job in the ministry. You have basically been in a silo. So you only have that experience. That's it. You don't have any other world experience. There's no such thing as a gap year in Japan. I remember before I talked about Tokyo University proposing that start from September, not from April, because other universities all start, most universities in the world start from September, and that would be easy to have your students go out as well as take students in. And that was killed by the system in 3 months. Nobody is thinking nobody wants to take a risk and step out. So those people in those silos have nothing else. So it's not their fault. They don't know what they don't know. So how do you get people up at the top of the bureaucrats that are making these policies to know? I don't know. I don't know. But I think there are so many people. Like one of my other friends I play pickleball with, Shingo. I don't know if Shingo, if you're listening or not. I'm going to mention you here. Shingo was a CEO in India for this company, and then he was there what 4 years, I think maybe a little longer. He was in Thailand. Brilliant. You got a lot of these really dynamic people. You need this kind of people making the policy. But normally, if you come from outside and you're not within that main frame, you will never get access to the top, to the president or whatever. And that's also another big problem is that in Japan, although they say the seniority system has broken down or is not the same, it's not the same as 50 years ago, but it's still there. If you look at the news and you look at like a lot of the business people, the guy who's the head of the Japan bank, the politicians, they're all old. They are old. Now, United States went through that thing with Biden and Trump and being old enough, but in Japan, executives, almost everyone is old. So you have that kind of thinking. And the young people and I've seen a lot of smart young people, even in my own company, that I thought those people would be great as leaders. When I talked to them on the side, I said, when will you get your chance? And they go, well, there's a transition going on when the old finally retire and then their generation moves in. 10 years, he said. I said, 10 years? That's a long time, right? It's not like right around the corner. So everybody is just patiently waiting their time. But house on fire, house on fire. Japan, you're number 4 now. Pretty soon you're going to be number 5 when India comes in. Who knows who's going to pass you by next? What are you going to do? You got a great, motivated, educated workforce. It's the management, it's the systems, it's the government that need to reform on how to do things differently. That's the Mike Matsuno opinion only. I'm sure not many people agree. But thank you, quietly wondering for your for agreeing on that. Let's see. Um, I will mention that in the 90s, Toyota engineers basically saved Porsche, introducing more advanced production brands. Of course, that was like Irasima Ichi. You are correct. Toyota and different special, like certain robotics, maybe like what was the Nintendo, certain areas, they are overseas. They are opening up shop there. Like I used to work for YKK, the zipper company. This is back what? How many years? 30 years ago. Um, and it was Jimmy Carter in the United States who became president after that. He was governor, and he let YKK into, I think it was Macon, Georgia, and they established their first factory and became a huge factory and success. At that time, YKK controlled 90% of all the zippers, fasteners, they called it, in Japan, and 50% of the world. I don't know what it is today, but so they already got it. That was back in the 1970s, I think it was. And remember those days? For those of you who are as old as me, the movies like Gung Ho, and they did a parody, kind of a satire about a Japanese company going to America and a car company, and what was his name? The guy who started it. He was Batman. I can't remember his name, but anyway, he was in there, and it was a comedy, but it was making fun of the Japanese that are coming over with their different sets of values and customs and how they kind of clashed. But that time, Japanese companies were actually very certain ones, trading companies, Toyota, certain businesses were very aggressive and very assertive at that time, and they had the money and they had the. So yes, even today there are Japanese companies who are being very savvy, but they're not many. They're not many. And I think a lot to do with it is my own opinion is that it's the people don't have, whether it's the language skills or the sales skills. I always believe that the Shinkansen, the bullet train, is the best high speed train in the world. But Japan has not been able to sell that many contracts to overseas to different countries. And I believe part of it is language, whatever country they're dealing with, but even in English. But also, I believe it's they're not able to present well. They're not good at presentation, and this goes back to soft skills. I see my company people. Well, I don't want to say too much, but I see the presentations done at my company or my previous company, and most of these are managers, executives, and a lot of times I say, "Oh, my students could do better than this," because they have never been trained in presentation. So imagine if that's the norm, and these people go out and try to sell either through a translator or they try to speak English. Either way, it's a lose. If you can't do it directly and with passion and do sales, you're not going to do that well. And that's why I said I was surprised that Tokyo got the Tokyo Olympics because, and they had that, she was French, Japanese, I think, and she spoke English really well and she did the presentation and she was very attractive and things. So I'm sure that helped, all of that helped. But normally, the average person, because of the language or whatever, is not able to really do the sales that Japan really needs. So they need to work on it. That's where your Kikoku Shicho, your returnees, would be great, or hire people like me, Japanese Americans or Japanese Canadians who native English is our I mean, we're native English speakers, and send us out to do the sales because we can sell, right? Anyway, um, okay, quietly one. Here's quietly wondering again. Um, the people and paper system may never be replaced. It should be, but it won't get changed. And yes, Japan is still about the paper. You know, um, people like to have the paper, and even Wi-Fi. My office didn't get Wi-Fi until 6 months ago, right? And it's like things like that. I think, and I always ask Japanese about that because when I used to work at the university, we always used to get the copy of whatever they're going to say, and they would read the same thing that's here, and I would always think, why? I couldn't read Japanese, but why bother when everybody could just read it, right? I was the only one that benefited from them reading because I could understand more than I could read. But everybody else, it's the same exact thing. But I asked Japanese about that, and they just say they feel comfort. This is their comfort blanket, paper. They feel comfortable. So yes, it is still a paper society. Um, you know, like even at I see the morning meetings that I'm in, and maybe it's our company's things, but with this, nobody is like checking or whatever. Everyone is just patiently waiting. You know, no one is like on their phone all the time, not like in the United States. I'm not saying that's good or bad. I'm just saying that there's a whole different concept of using your phone for social media or whatever you use it for, as well as compared to paper. Paper, I guess, is still solid and it's real, I guess. I don't know. But again, yeah, thank you, Quietly Warren. Exactly. So, how to change the people and paper system? I don't know. That's really up to the young people. I'm just giving you my noisy opinion. So, is there anything else that I missed? No one thinks that's. So, for today, I'm gonna pretty much close here. Is that the whole point? Is Japan international? My answer is the average person probably no. There are people who have lived abroad. You have the returnees. You have a lot of international like scientists who have gotten. A lot of them have gone, and this is what the people who have won the Peace Prize have said. Those who have gotten it in Japan have all said in Japanese to the people listening, if you want to get ahead and if you really want to learn, you need to go abroad for school, whether it's your postdoctorate or for research. You need to go abroad. You cannot stay in Japan. And the problem is, most Japanese scholars or teachers or stay in Japan because the thing about going abroad is it's hard, right? It's hard to study in another language. And like even if you studied it for 6 years or 10 years, to get classes in the language of difficult content, it's not easy. So it's easier just to stay. And, if you're a doctor, you're going to get a good job usually. So, but again, that's the problem is that I worry that Japan is going inward and they're going backwards. And as they drop in economic stature, like and nobody seems to be worried that much. I think it's a house on fire, but no one else um, seem to be that worried. But something has to change. Oh, but to be honest, I don't think it's gonna get better before it gets worse. And the reason I say this is Japan is gamang zuyoi. Gamang zuyoi means gamang is to endure or withstand. It's like me trying to live in an apartment that's 95 degrees and being like, oh, yeah, that's gamang. Stupid gamang, but gamang. But Japan is a gamang zuyoi country. They are tough. They go through the grind. They accept that they have to sometimes suffer. So as Japan drops in economic stature, people are just going to tighten the belt more. Taxes might go up, prices go up, whatever. They'll just accept. And it takes a long while until Japan feels at the point that they're going to turn it over, that they're going to change. So the sad part is, if you already know what's going to happen, it'll be good to start earlier. But because of the way the system is set up and everything is slow, and people don't complain usually unless it gets really bad, people are gamang ziyoi. People want to get along, which are good concepts too, right? In a different situation, that it won't happen for a while. And my biggest worry is not for this generation, but for the next one, the people who are their children and their grandchildren, that Japan is really going to be in a bind if they don't figure out how to get out of this. Like how to get out of this kind of not free fall, but this. Yes, the stock market did so very very well in the last 3 6 months, and suddenly Friday it dropped the biggest drop outside of Black Monday, and nobody really kind of knew why. Although the yen went down, which was good for Japan, I guess. It went down to 147 or something. I don't know enough about the money economics, but you know, those things are happening. So it's really, really a tough situation for Japan. So anyway, thank you very much for listening. In 2 weeks, I want to talk a little bit about the Japanese university system and how they try to internationalize, because people think, okay, we need to internationalize, get these, college graduates ready for the workforce to compete in the world, and how that system seems to be not doing very well. Um, okay, so one last one here by Quietly One. They are building up differences against the international onslaught instead of ways to adapt and prosper from the changes. Yes, you can look at it that way. I think that's very interesting. You can either be defenses instead of figuring out how to adapt and prosper. And that's exactly what I think Seiko Sensei was saying, is to acquire what the other people are doing for the betterment of your own society, right? That's what the good part of internationalization is. You get cheaper consumer goods, you get different services, you get different ways of doing things, right? I read somewhere that, and I used to tell my students this: 90% of the new invention or new products or new ideas that are selling in Japan have come from abroad. And that's why going abroad and seeing different things and then bringing them back and making them yours or selling them in a way in Japan, there's nothing wrong with that. Why reinvent the wheel? Why not just do that if at a very simple business level? But if that's true, you gotta go out. And I think that's why I worry about Japan. I talked about this before. Sakoku mind. Sakoku mind means basically the mind that's in isolation still. And I still think Japan is in a kind of a Sakoku mindset, because it's geographically isolated, and because it never really got occupied except outside of World War II by the United States. Outside of that, it had never been occupied before. So it's, in a way, it's kind of a pure, not pure society, I guess. Hard to, I don't know if that's the right word. So, what is Japan going to do? I believe they need to internationalize and do their best to let in the good and try to keep out as much as you can the negative, of course, but improve their systems, improve their educational systems, their English language systems, and really focus on it instead of the government and the ministries doing the band aid approach. In 2 weeks, I'll tell you about how the Ministry of Education does all band aid approaches. And that's why nothing is really concrete or nothing's different. It's the same. If anything, it's gotten less people going out, less Japanese going out, and everybody in working in the universities just checks the box. Okay, we did the conference. Okay, we did this. No one is actually thinking like, we gotta make this thing. We gotta turn this upside down. We gotta change all of this around. You know. Anyway, sorry if today's topic was a little bit discouraging. Anyway, thank you all. I really appreciate for those of you who are here listening and stayed on this long. I'm sorry if I kind of went off on a little rant, but I really believe, remember, I do love Japan and I love the people and I want Japan to do well. And I guess I feel a little bit frustrated that I see the potential there, but because of systems and because partially cultural norms and because people are not willing to step out and because of norms where the pounding nail gets the standing nail gets pounded down, I think that it it limits Japan, and they're tripping over themselves, not competitors. They're tripping over themselves because of the systems they have set up and the steps they have laid out actually is inefficient, not productive, and it hurts themselves more than it hurts their competitors. So I love Japan and I want you to do well in Japan and gambatte hoshi. So anyway, thanks everybody. Appreciate it. See you again in 2 weeks. And that one will be about internationalization and the university system and how it's not working so well. Thanks again, everybody. Have a great weekend. Stay cool, especially those of you in Japan. It's only going to be over 100 today. Not bad. Take care. Bye bye.